This is an account of some reflexive research that I've done as part of my ongoing doctoral studies. So sometime in 2006, I was in an interview for, sorry, I'm trying to make the slide move. Why can't I make the slide move? I was in an interview for some ultimately unsuccessful secondary maths consultancy work. And towards the end of the interview, the interviewer said, "Will the real Fiona Yardley please stand up?" Essentially, he couldn't place me. He knew that I had a degree in history and that I had trained to teach history. He knew that I had a master's in curriculum studies. He knew I had experience teaching maths and as head of the maths department, but he couldn't place me. So I used this as my point of entry text. Because the question of my mathematical identity is a complex one which I've grappled with over many, many years. And there was no sort of single way that I could enter into trying to understand my mathematical identity. And Berry's metaphor of the point of entry text, the poet, creates an entry point that I keep threading back to without losing the complexity of my mathematical identity. She uses this image, which she calls the butterfly model. I actually changed that, I think being mathematical, to a honeycomb model using the honeycomb conjecture, which proves that the regular hexagon is the most efficient form of tiling, or in other words, it has the most intersections with than any other shape. So it meant there were lots of opportunities to explore the complex intersections. But the concept of bricolage was not actually originally a methodology. It was originally introduced by Levi-Strauss in 1966, the idea of an intellectual bricoler who, quote, is adept at performing a large number of diverse tasks using whatever is at hand. So the bricoler doesn't have a defined project. They just use stuff that they gather along the way because they might come in handy. And they don't confine their knowledge or their equipment to any one use. Now, I loved maths at school, but I studied history at university. I taught history and geography before then turning to teach maths and becoming head of maths department. I got a master's in curriculum studies. I taught maths for a few years and I became a freelance consultant in lots of different subjects, then returning to teach the classroom to teach as a lead maths teacher. Along the way, I also got myself a degree in maths and I'm now a senior lecturer in maths education. So my career has used skills that I've gathered along the way. I am Levi-Strauss's intellectual bricoleur. So as a bricoleur, I used a whole range of data collection methods, reflective journaling, I used questionnaire, discussion, private correspondence, timelining, use of artifacts, a quantitative analysis of textbooks, historical document analysis, just a whole range. And each piece of data I collected, I recorded on a regular hexagon, I then spread them out and I played with them, placing the poet here right in the middle, and then playing with these to look at patterns and to see what was coming out. And as I was doing this, some questions came to my mind, which are recorded here and which I used essentially as my research question. So let's have a look at these. What is my mathematical identity? Well, we all have multiple identities. So mine include as a mum, as a wife, as a daughter, as a teacher, as a lecturer, as an academic, as a Christian. And then there are also qualities that I value in myself. I'm nurturing, I have intellectual curiosity, I have creativity. Most aspects of my identity are not problematic to me, but my mathematical identity has always been problematic to me. And I wondered why. I asked someone who knows me very well, my mum, and she said, it's because of your gender. Now that's possibly true. I look back at the book that I used to revise for my A-levels. When 98% of over 500 questions that there were in that book did not feature people at all. Of the very small number that did feature people, only 2 featured females, and in both cases they were being categorised against males in combinatoric questions. I also use timelining. Now this is something I always do when I'm beginning teaching teachers, and I matched this up with other data that I collected, such as in my reflective journaling, the story of a lunchtime supervisor when I was 5 or 6. I asked her what happens after 99, and she told me, and my mind was blown when I realised I could now keep on counting forever. My A-level German teacher, he said, "You're a historian, not a mathematician," when I asked him recently about this research. And I also remember a moment of insecurity during a maths conference when I was in my early 30s, where I didn't dare ask a question in case I looked a fool about the maths. So the data pointed to me being othered by maths and to me being unable to identify as a mathematician. Now, the questionnaire data that I got disappointed me. So I asked, do you have any stories that feature me and mathematics? I had over 40 responses, and 2/3 of them didn't refer to maths at all. They referred to teaching. For example, my father-in-law said, "Fiona always talks with such enthusiasm about the light bulb moment when a child finally gets it." My poet interviewer, he seemed to imply that you couldn't be a maths educator if you were not also a mathematician. And I wondered if I was making the same assumption, and certainly my disappointment suggests that I was. But was I right to? So in order to answer that, I looked at what we've just been talking about, Ball's work on pedagogical content knowledge and the 6 categories that her and her team identified as being the knowledge required for teaching mathematics. So in the first column here are her 6 areas of knowledge. Now, I don't expect you to read what's there on the screen. It's more to show you what I did. So I took her 6 areas of knowledge, and then for each, I reflected on my own experiences of teaching maths before I had a maths degree, while I was studying for a maths degree, and then once I had a maths degree. And to summarise what's there on that slide, I found that actually it was my length of professional experience which had a far greater impact on all areas of knowledge, with the one exception of horizon knowledge, which we were just talking about. So while initially I was disappointed because I wanted to see myself as a mathematician, not as an educator, but as I read through the questionnaire responses, I began to see that the qualities that I value in myself were coming up again and again: nurturing, intellectual curiosity, and creativity. All 3 were being referred to with respect to my teaching, the latter 2 also with respect to maths, which then led on to the question, what do I perceive as what mathematics is? Now, one person in my questionnaire summed this up: Fiona thinks maths is fun. While I was doing this research, this popped up on my Twitter feed, and I love it. On the left, I've got a feeling this is what the interviewer in my poet had in mind. On the right is how I actually conceptualise maths. And this is mirrored in my approach to craft as well. So in this picture on the right is a construction toy that I bought for myself. And this may be what others think of as maths. On the left is a button box, which I made. And I think of that as maths as well. And my mum's comments might help you to understand this. She said, Fiona's approach to textiles is based, I think, on a love of patterns, even though they seem somewhat random at times. My love of knitting is also very strongly connected to my love of maths. I never use a pattern, or very rarely. So the bed sheet in the middle there, I planned it using 5:7 ratio paper, so that I got proportionate lettering. The other two, I was exploring rates of change. So this one in the top left-hand corner, I cast on a random number of stitches and then followed a repeating pattern, knit 10, knit 2 together, and that's how they turned out. And in the other one, I was trying to make knit gift bags, which follow the rates of change of different shapes of bottles. So you've got a wine bottle, a beer bottle, a spirit bottle. My research also led me to reflect on possibly the most intensely spiritual experience that happened at a very low point in my life, when I was watching a fountain playing, and I realized that the shape that was being played out by the fountain was so perfect that it could be modeled by a quadratic equation, and that kind of made everything fall in place, and then everything just felt all right. Oh, and here are my maths clothes, or some of my maths clothes, and you won't be surprised to see that this is how I have coped with 2020. So I think it's fair to say that my creative and curious approach is probably different to most people's conceptualization of maths, and certainly different to what was presented to me as maths when I was at school. I guess that then led on to the question, how are different school subjects constructed? And why is maths, school maths, conceptualized in that particular way? Why do people think it's weird to like history and maths, or to like creativity and maths, or to like knitting and maths? Who decided those boundaries for maths? And can I break them? And my answer is yes. I can break them, and yes, I will break them. And for my doctoral thesis, I'm challenging my trainee maths teachers to question and disrupt the boundaries. So I set out in part seeking to answer the question, am I a mathematician? My research has led me to reject that question. I reject it because I was trying to fit myself into someone else's conceptualization of a mathematician. And I didn't really stop to consider whose conceptualization. I hadn't clearly defined what I was measuring myself against. And I used this lack of clarity to kind of other myself. Some part of society, which I wasn't allowed into, from which I was excluded, had a clear understanding of what a mathematician was. Not only did I not fit into that model, but I was even excluded from knowing what that model was. Intellectual bricolage and bricolage's methodology have really changed my perspective. Levi-Strauss's description of the bricoler, it resonated so refreshingly with my own sense of self, that rich mix of experience, knowledge, skills that mix together and make us who we are. It's no surprise, is it, that we don't all turn out to fit into neat categories. So this has changed my perspective by realizing that when I'm asking, am I a mathematician, I'm establishing a false binary. I don't need to answer other people's questions about who I am. Now, a significant proportion of my trainee maths teachers don't have a degree in maths or even in a related discipline. Some have degrees in drama or languages or politics. So I, in my doctoral work, am exploring how they position themselves with respect to mathematics, and how their academic identity and their conceptualization of maths changes as they develop as teachers. So rather than them becoming more maths, I want to challenge them to do as I have and make maths more them. Thank you.